When she had her pregnancy with her first son, she had preeclampsia and different things, and her OBGYN said, "You will never carry another child. Your body is not meant to." So I met her when I was doing a reading for her. There was this little girl energy who showed up and was like, "Hey, I'm your future daughter." And so then this soul went into this whole transmission about how that was not true. That was the projection of that professional. From that point on, she kind of overhauled her health and how she was caring for herself and different things. And she also started getting into meditation. She got the instructive from this soul, like, you are going to try to conceive April 2022, so just this year, and was able to conceive and is now having a very beautiful, beautiful pregnancy experience.
Emily, you live in Toronto.
I do.
You do?
Yes, I do. Just
What's it
outside
like?
Toronto. It's funny because I kind of consider myself like, when I was younger, I was always like obsessed with being American,
Yeah.
and I didn't relate to being Canadian at all. And now,
USA.
you know,
USA.
yes, yes. So I kind of consider myself a little bit of both. I have lots of friends in America and here as well too. But it's it's interesting, Canada's, we've had an interesting couple of years, but we're doing
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, right, right. I mean, I have so many clients who are Canadian who are like desperate to find somebody outside of the system. And a big part of it is like they don't feel like they have the autonomy to make decisions for themselves anymore. And as you and I both know in our work, like there's very little in our control, especially around pregnancy and conception and this and that. And with increasing control, I feel like people are peeling back and kind of touching in a little bit more with intuition, and that serves, I think, people in a great way. But if you're in a place like the United States or Canada, which is, it's like Canada was out competing us for how we can implement our legal system, so to speak. You guys won. We'll give you that one.
Yeah.
I think it has really put people into a space of tapping in and really looking inward, which I think is very much in service to sort of your work, I suppose. Not in service to, but you know what I mean, in alignment with. So
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And just one point on that, what I've noticed, I'm a observer. I love to observe how things are happening, and I love looking at the macro. And something I've noticed for just in general over the last few years with Canadian people is we've really had to have this kind of uprising where we started to use our voices and actually said, "Hey, that's not okay," and "Hey, you need to stop doing that to me," or whatever else.
sure.
Because we're, just sort of collectively known as being nice, and we're cool with everything, and it's all no problem, and it's all good. And so I actually noticed over the last few years that it was really beautiful. There's a lot of people who are like, "That's actually not okay. And I'm actually not feeling nice right now about
Yeah.
this,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Totally. Totally. Um, well, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of things related to kind of tapping in, like truly tapping into our soul's journey here. Why don't you tell everybody briefly, Emily? I don't think many people are going to need too much of an introduction, but like I was trying to tell my wife, I was like, oh, I'm interviewing this amazing woman today. And she was reading your bio in the car. As I said before we started recording, we were taking the girls from back from the pool, and I was getting ready. And I was like, gosh, I don't know her very well, but I kind of feel like I know her. And I told her, my wife, your name, and she was like, oh my gosh, she used words like psychic and medium and clairvoyant and all these things. And I was like, yeah, we're going to talk about, she was like really, really intrigued. So what do you tell people about what you do and who you are?
I always take every opportunity to answer this question and enjoy answering this question because, I mean, it's truly like, if you had told me that I would be describing myself with these terms, when I was like a teenager, I would have just been like, "You are off your
Okay.
rocker."
Okay, Nad. Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
Mom.
exactly. So, just a little backstory on my experience. So, as a child, I was very sensitive. I was a very, very, very sensitive child. I was always seeing all kinds of things in my rooms at night. I always thought that or I did actually have like a time travel portal in my closet. I
So
was
it went
always reading
beyond
books.
just the imaginary friend. Like you were,
Oh,
this was way beyond the normal
yes.
childhood imagination.
Yep, absolutely. Like, I
Yeah.
have memories of walking into my third grade classroom and knowing that my third grade teacher had just finalized a divorce the following evening. And I kind of went up to her and was like, I'm so sorry about what happened. And she was like, what are you talking about? How did you know that? Like that kind of thing, just like little things that I just thought I was like, it's so obvious. It's so obvious that she's upset and that she just had an end to her marriage. Like I didn't see how other people couldn't
Mm.
see that or
Hmm.
understand that. It was
Hmm.
kind of weird to me. And
Was it
then
weird to the
I
adults in your life too?
Oh, yeah, they're like, "You are not supposed to know these things or say these things to people around you," and so, of course, I started to repress it and kind of just keep these things to myself, which kind of led to, me having a very normal, adolescent life and just kind of repressing all of my feelings, and I'm sure all of the people that I went to school with, college, high school, university, I'm not in contact with most of them anymore, I'm sure they're just like, "Who is that? Like, what is she
Yeah.
up to?"
Yeah.
Because that just wasn't the person they knew me as because I was so repressed that I had so repressed that part of myself. So I had kind of what I call my reawakening when I was 18, graduating high school, and I had this dream that basically showed me a couple of different paths that I could take moving forward. I could go this path, which is the path that I thought I was going to take, going to college and university, which I did end up doing anyway. Um, or, you can go this path and you can explore these abilities and you can allow yourself to have this reawakening and start to serve people and help people and all this kind of stuff. And so,
Hmm.
anyway, I took a couple detours and found my way back eventually
What
to
did you
these
study in
abilities.
college? I'm just curious. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I was in the optometric field, so I was an optician, a registered
Oh,
optician.
interesting.
hmm I worked with eyes. They were my first love.
That kind of makes me think
Uh,
of clairvoyance in a way. You know,
yeah.
it's certainly, the eyes being the windows to the soul. I mean, there's all these fun little platitudes we serve, that serve us. But I always wonder, like, when a person is thoughtful at 18, you never know what you
hmm
want to be when you grow up. Nobody knows. Nobody once knows they really want to be a doctor because they have no idea what that means, but they want to
hmm
help people. And
Yeah.
I would always imagine somebody who has these sort of psychic abilities as a young kid might go into psychology because we
Mm,
naturally think it's a manifestation of the brain. I got to figure this out. But you went
yes.
in a totally different direction, which I think is
I
so
went
interesting.
science. I went full
Yeah,
science.
yeah, yeah.
But I was also very interested in psychology too. So you've got a point there. Um, So, and what's interesting just as to bounce off of that is working with patients is, I was usually very close to them. Like we were sitting close together. I was literally looking deeply into their eyes in many instances, and very often I would get intuitive information for my patients and try to discreetly kind of pass it on to them. And so it was an interesting time. I
By the
most
way, you're
certainly learned a
pregnant.
lot.
And number one or number two? No.
Yes. And you need glasses,
Yeah,
sir.
right. If you're going to take
Yeah,
care of this baby, actually, you're going to need glasses. Like, oh my gosh, I had
exactly,
no idea.
exactly. So, and ironically too, I wear contact lenses, but I also have like really not great physical vision. And I've
Hmm.
asked about that before too in meditation. And it's basically like, well, and I have had this from a very young age. And it was basically like, well, we had to kind of make you trust this sort of third eye vision before you learn to kind of rely
Oh my
or
gosh. Yeah.
lean on your physical vision.
Yeah, and historically, how many oracles and whatnot have we seen with bandages over their eyes, or they're totally
Blind.
blind altogether, and they're just seeing
Yeah.
with their third eye, which I
Yeah.
think is a beautiful. And also, I want to give a caveat. Even though I said psychology makes sense, I'm thinking from my 18-year-old self before I really
Yes.
understood what it means to be alive and where we
Yeah.
are in this greater cosmos. So it
Yes.
makes sense to
Yes.
me that even intuitively you were like, oh, this isn't something for the mind. There's something about the eyes that are important here. So that's beautiful.
Exactly.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah.
This is so exciting.
Yeah. So basically then I worked in the field for a few years and during that time I was also working with or I had found my way to basically my first mentor, my first teacher. And the first time I sat with my teacher, she looked at me and she said, and I already knew this, but it was really cool to have someone recognize it. As she said, you had all these abilities as a child, you put them away for X amount of years, and now it's time for you to start using them again, and I'm going to teach you how.
Mm,
And I loved it because she didn't really she wasn't like, do you want to be taught by me? She was like, you are going to be taught by
Now
me, and
you're
we're
my
going to
student.
do this together. Yeah.
Welcome.
I was like, okay, sure, I accept this assignment.
Yeah.
And so from there, she really just taught me how to work with this raw kind of experience that I had had throughout my life so far and channel it in a way that I could use it to help people.
And now you also mentor people in this way. Is
Yeah.
that right? Wow.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. Which is
Sorry,
amazing,
continue.
full
Sorry,
circle.
continue.
Yeah. Um, and so she took me on this path, and where I started in my work, and I still have this kind of name attached to um, my work. I have done different things, and I do different things now alongside this as well. Was mediumship, and so as we're going to parlay into likely another part of this conversation, but I always just, and I know this is a big part of your work too, Nathan, of just like birth and death and the intersections between those two things, where I kind of started by working with souls who were in physical bodies and working to kind of facilitate communication between those souls who are no longer in physical bodies to people who love them and miss them here on planet Earth. And now part of a big focus of my work is working with kind of souls who are incoming to bodies on
Yeah.
planet Earth. So I kind of made this interesting um, roundabout exploration of death and after death communication, and then pre-conception and birth communication. So that's sort of how I landed here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you sent me a little excerpt from, I guess it's a book that's in the works. Is that right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah, I can't wait to
correct.
read that book.
Yeah.
In that, in the excerpt, you talk about a person coming to you. She was a client who came to you. Were you already like working as a medium, or what type of therapy were you offering people before you really kind of stumbled into this space of calling in spirit
Yeah.
babies, which we're going to
Yeah.
talk quite a bit about today?
Yes. Yes. So you're right. I was already working as a medium. I hadn't discovered that part of my work yet. And so, in that little piece of the book that I sent you, that was kind of like the first couple of people that I discovered this with, because this was just not at all on my radar. I was like, I'm a medium. I'm working with people who are past. That's what I do. That's all that I do. And also, kind of in conjunction with that, working just with sort of general support on people's life path of just like helping them sort out different things and doing some healing, energy healing work as well. But yeah, that through that was how I discovered this spirit baby work.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to tell the story too, because
Let's tell the story of the client. You use a sort of a fictional name just for anonymity's sake, but tell about your first experience with Amy. I think that's a really
okay.
I had to read that through a couple times to really try to capture what you were the
Yeah,
essence of your work, but I think it'd be best to just hear it
sure.
again.
Yeah, absolutely. I love to tell these stories. I think they also really give good context to the mechanics of how this is all working. So,
Hmm.
in this first experience, or one of these first experiences, as I started to discover the spirit baby work, I was working with a client who I will call Amy. And Amy was coming to me just sort of in general looking for support in her life. She was not giving much away, which I loved. She was just kind of like, I'm here, I'm available. I'm just, looking to see what's available for me, basically. And so I do what I call tuning in at the beginning of every session, which is just my chance to really create an attunement to the person that I'm working with's energy and their energy field, as well as whoever or whatever wants to make themselves available in the session. And when I tuned in for her, there was this little girl who appeared, and I see psychically very clairvoyantly. So that's kind of in my mind's eye. It's also kind of just like a full body feeling of like, there's a little girl here. And so I remember presencing that and bringing that to her and saying, thinking with my mediumship mind, like, oh, this is a little girl that has once been connected to Amy, and hopefully she knows who I'm talking about. And so brought it to her, and she was like, basically, I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, that doesn't seem right, because this little girl is so alive. And she was like waving at me, and she was so animated and so real and so 3D in so many ways. And so I'm like, okay, I have to try and figure this out, because the way that I'm usually approaching a session. It's not working. What is happening here? So I went and asked this energy of this little girl that was presenting, and I said, "Who are you? Like, why are you here?" And she said, "Well, I'm Amy's daughter." And I told Amy, I said, "She sings. She's your daughter. Like, y-
Don't
is
shoot
this
the
your daughter?"
messenger, Amy. I'm just telling
You
you
know,
what's coming through.
I know. And she was like, and she kind of looked at me and she took a minute and she was like, "The only thing I can think about is I had," and previously I forgot this detail. I was like, "This little girl looks to be around 3 years old." She was presenting around 3 years old. And she said, "The only thing I can think about is I had a miscarriage about 3 years ago. Um, and I always felt that the energy that was there was a girl."
Wow.
And she said, "Could that be it?" And I said, "I don't know, let me ask." And so the little girl said, "Yeah, that's me," like waving and smiling and kind of happy that we got there and that we made the recognition of her. And so from there, once we had figured out, okay, this is a soul. This is a soul who has been here previously in a previous pregnancy, um,
Mhm.
and is no longer here anymore, but she's looking to communicate. So then I started to just get curious of like, what other details could we get here? So I said, I asked the little girl, I said, "Tell me about your experience from your side of things." So she proceeded to bring forward a lot of really interesting detail that I'd never thought could be possible about Amy's pregnancy, how the pregnancy came to an end, why it came to an end, and then also just some details about their conception journey moving forward. Because this little girl told me, well, they're still actively trying to conceive. And that was the main, basically, intention that Amy brought into the session today, which she didn't speak, but that was really what she was looking to do and get into. And so, of course, this little girl came as a response to that sort of unspoken intention. So that was my
Gosh.
first experience with that. And it like
Mm.
kind of blew my mind. I had to really, as I say in this little piece of the book, I had to really take some time after that one and just go, wow, like that was
Mm.
amazing.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I'm
Like an
still in contact with
integration
Amy.
process. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a huge integration process because for whatever
Mm.
reason, that just had never occurred to me as being possible before,
Yeah.
that there could be that kind of communication. Um, so, yeah.
A couple things came up for me, a couple of terms that I wanted to take out of that I've heard myself. And when
Mhm.
I was a resident, of course, everybody knows I'm an OBGYN, and you're in this very kind of regimented, very extreme acute care setting as an
Yeah.
OBGYN in the hospital. And then in the clinical setting, you're helping people with miscarriages or helping to help them kind of integrate the birth experience. And a lot of the similar words come up. The word animate I thought was really intriguing when you use that word. And then also, I think first and foremost that this Amy, this person in your who's coming to you for some guidance, that they felt a compulsion towards the energy of a little girl. There's something like that's actually the crux of everything that you do. Is there's this essence of this little girl. So I want people to also if you're very confronted by this, women tell me these things, and men, actually, their partners as well. I feel the energy of this baby is trying to come through.
Mm. Yes.
A lot of doctors hear this as well, and we kind of brush it off as woo-woo, but when you hear it so often, it's not like the crazy lady over there thinks she felt the spirit of the baby. It's many women, most women, and
Yes.
many of their partners. I wanted to bring up two short little stories. One was with an acupuncturist out in San Francisco. Her name's Edith Ubuntu Chan. She's been on my show, and she's this very powerful healer who tells all kinds of great stories in the episode I did with her. And as I've gotten to know her, she talks through the language of her son about where babies come from. And he's like, well, mama, when I was up in outer space, like it's his language in the 3D physical world. Like when I was up in outer space, we were waiting for you and papa to be ready, for me. We were watching, and you were my mama and dada. And I was waiting for the time to come in. This is a little kid who's like 6 was telling her this. He didn't see some sci-fi show on HBO or whatever. This is just the language, putting the words that he's been taught in English to the experience of waiting for the time to come into the womb. The other thing I wanted to share is that coming from a very strict reductionist medical scientific education program, which we all know so well because that's virtually every doctor out there practices through that lens, where we separate the physical from the mental, emotional, spiritual, and all these other energetic bodies. I came into our own pregnancies not skeptical, because I had read, what was the name of that book? Spirit
Spirit
Babies by
babies. Yeah.
Walter
Walter McKitchen.
McKitchen. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
I had read that back in residency, or maybe in fellowship, when I was actually studying end of life, because it was like, there's something to this. All these women are saying these things. And then I'm seeing kind of the reflection of that in death. And of course, we're going to get, into that. But I didn't really have a direct experience with it. And if you're distracted and you haven't honed those skills or those perceptions, we all have this intuitive, perceptive ability, but we've been told to brush it aside. And I think it started off with the imaginary friends, like those things aren't
Yes.
real. The trees aren't talking to you. There's just this, go play with your blocks, in this way. Don't get out of the lines, and so when we were pregnant with our second, we took a mushroom journey. And I know everybody out there is like aghast. Oh, you took mushrooms in pregnancy? Yes, I took mushrooms in pregnancy, and so did my wife, who was actually the pregnant one. And
I
if
love it.
you have any issues with that, please reach out to me. But we did it, and we were in a tree house in Red River Gorge. And about an hour in, I don't know if you've ever experimented with psychedelics. I mean, you kind of
I
live
have.
in the psychedelic world in some regard. But
Yes.
while I was, going deep into ceremony, I had my hand on my wife's belly. And again, she was like maybe 6, 7 months pregnant. And normally what comes to me is a vision. There's a figure, and it's not a humanoid figure. It's more of like a serpent, which is not uncommon in, ayahuasca ceremony and whatnot. But this was mushrooms, and I've always had a deep connection with these little mushrooms. And these were homegrown. They were something I'd sung to them, and I'd raised them myself, and they had always served me in a really beautiful way. And this figure, though, appeared, and I figured, oh, it's that serpent that always come to me. It's like a hooded cobra. But it wasn't that. It was this other something, this essence of something else. It was the essence of a little girl. So I asked, who are you? I said, are you my daughter? And when I say I asked, it was seeing this through the third eye. This was not an actual
Yes.
physical manifestation. It was not a hallucination. It was me experiencing the essence of a little girl. She said, yeah, hi, Dad. And she waved to me. And it wasn't a little arm. It was the essence of a wave. And I said, well, how are you doing in there? Because I was like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have done mushrooms. I'm still stuck in that reductive mindset. She's like, I'm fine. Mom's having a hard time though. And I look up and my wife is just bawling. So I was like, whoa, okay. And as I'm trying to think about, like, what do you ask the spirit of your daughter who's gestating inside your wife?
Yes.
You kind of lose track because you're not really there. You're somewhere else. And so later the vision came back during a song change. We were playing in East Forest, the Spores album, if anybody's curious. And this figure reemerged, and there was this twirling, dancing figure. And there were these 3 larger figures, almost like, dare I say, like witches over a cauldron. And this little girl, the words I used, and this is the reason I'm bringing the story up, is that she was being animated by
Yes.
these other spirits as she was gestating inside of my wife. And I'm getting chills just thinking about it, because it was a very real experience. And I had communicated thereafter. I was able to communicate with her, almost like text messaging in my head with her. It was very strange. But then later, it was the essence of my daughter, Everly, who was born at home, like I said, 20 feet away, was the same essence I'd experienced in that journey. Only I had to use psychedelics, whereas you seem to be able to tap into this. So I wanted to share those stories with you, not to like show off how in tune I am with your work, but to also emphasize that I think a lot of people realize that they can do this without those psychedelic medicines. But I also wanted to ask, in your working with Amy, or maybe in clients since then, do you use anything in order to help to not recultivate, to maybe recenter this clairvoyance or clairaudience, or however you describe it?
Such a great question and such a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing with me, because I'm selfishly always looking for stories,
Hmm.
because I find that it's, and just as you illustrated your that story that you had, and that experience that you had with your daughter's energy, that I find that that is so helpful to somebody who's listening out there and they're just like, wow, that's possible. That is possible, whether through different forms of,
Yeah.
assisted communication. And I just love how well you illustrated the what I experience every day, which is the animation and
Yeah.
the true, like, just how viscerally alive these energies are before they're actually physical, and how they start to merge in with the family before they're physical, and how they start to learn how a family is working and how they can support a family or support their parents or connect or communicate with their parents before they're physical. It's so incredible. It blows my mind every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
But to
Hmm.
answer your question, um, I find that sometimes I kind of define three different types of preconception, or you kind of had both of these experiences of kind of, no, sorry, you had an in utero communication, what I would call an in utero communication experience with your daughter. Um, and I think there's different ways that that can be done. That can be kind of spontaneous, where you're not really necessarily trying to have it happen, and she was kind of just giving you the experience, and maybe using um, the magic of the mushrooms to kind of heighten and
Yeah.
open that experience even
Right.
more for you.
Right. Right. It's
And
kind of
things of
taking the
the
veil
image.
away as opposed to adding
Yeah,
something to. Right. Right.
exactly, exactly. She was kind of like, oh, there's an opportunity here for us to have a really powerful back and forth communication. And I can use this imagery and I can use this and this. So I personally have gotten to the point where I can kind of switch my brain waves, so to speak, from regularly speaking and talking, just as you and I are talking right now with a client, into kind of, as I go into the tune in process, I can go really deeply into having very mystical kind of experiences and relays and communications with these souls. But it is helpful for me also sometimes to use different kinds of plant medicines, and I'm also a big fan of using mushrooms to kind of enhance my experience, and also
Can't
just
imagine what that would be like for you with your
it's
already have a thin veil.
it just blows the whole thing open.
Wow.
And it kind of just shows what I find how mushrooms support me in this work is they continue to show me that it's like more, this is more, here's what more is possible, here's what more you can see, here's how deep the communication can go, here is how beautiful you can help these parents have, how much more beautifully these parents can have a communication with the souls of their children. So
Mm.
I use it periodically here and there, just to make sure that I'm continuing to expand myself in this work and not get complacent with it. Because
Yeah.
sometimes it can be like, oh yeah, there's a soul here, and they're this and this, and they're going to be like this, and blah 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 blah, and then moving on. And I have to remind myself of just how
Yeah.
magical this
Yeah.
is. It's so
And such a
amazing.
privilege. Like
It
there's an
is.
honoring to this, to these powers that you have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to remind myself, like, this is pretty amazing. And so that plant medicines help me do that.
Mm. Thinking back to my experience with my daughter, I'd be curious to know your thoughts on this. There's a friend of mine. I don't know if you know Charles Eisenstein. He's this really brilliant philosopher and a good friend of mine. His wife Stella is even more magical than Charles. She has a resonant healing practice that she teaches people. And when I last visited
Wow.
them in Rhode Island, she had a woman who was postpartum come in, and she was like, "Can you kind of sit in and just let me know what you think?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm happy to."
Yeah.
And then I was kind of blown away because this woman had this trauma from an otherwise uncomplicated C-section, but she had this
Mm,
some holdup about the C-section. And I don't know if Stella was necessarily able to help her. She uses sort of a gentle touch. It's not Reiki. It's quite different. But after the fact, we were all sitting, me, her, Charles, and some other people were sitting in the living room together. And we were kind of conjecturing, like, is there a purpose for a C-section?
mm,
Because so many people have them. And could it be, and this was actually Stella's idea, I want to give her credit, but she had said, could it be that the embodiment of those energetic bodies into the physical occurs through even the lens of Stan Grof's work in the perinatal matrices, as the baby's going through this very stressful experience, that's where the energetic bodies are embodied into the physical. And if a baby comes through the C-section, they don't go through that experience. Sort of like a butterfly coming out of a what is it called, a chrysalis or whatever.
Yes, precisely.
So when those babies come through the abdomen, they don't get embodied immediately. Eventually they do, but they actually remain tethered to the astral. And so they bring this angelic healing uh, property or essence
Yes.
to the healthcare, the delivery team, so to speak, and the community of people around them. Are they angels coming through? And they have to come through in that direction, because otherwise they wouldn't remain as tethered to the spiritual realm. What are your thoughts? When does a person become embodied with these energetic properties? In the uterus? Is it after birth? Like, what's your gut tell you?
So good. I love this. I love the I'd be happy to add my 2 cents to your musings. So something that just occurred to me, and I'm going to share this because I thought this was
Yeah.
really neat, and I've never thought of this before. Often, when I have seen in my kind of dream time experiences and just in different visions that I've had, you know what they say about sort of the, I guess this, I shouldn't say this is the norm for every soul that's leaving the planet or even coming to the planet, but there
Yeah.
really is, you know, the kind of cliche, you know, the tunnel of light, and there's, you know, you
Sure.
walk towards the light, like this kind of whole thing. In a sense, that actually does exist. There really is this kind of portal, this wormhole that helps assist a soul leaving the planet into the next kind of, or
Mm.
into
Hmm.
the
I
dimension
call
that
it the
they're
Earth
traveling
School.
to.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, exactly. And that in some way, as a baby is coming through the birth canal, that birth canal almost kind of mirrors that portal and that tunnel of
Hmm.
transition. It's a
Hmm.
tunnel of transition from one form into the next. And so I've never thought of it, or I've never received information on that before, but it makes complete sense to me that as they are kind of coming through this birth canal, that they are being completely embodied into their physical experience and getting ready to um, enter the world in that way. And that it likely would be different in a C-section experience, and it may take longer for a soul who transitioned into the world in that way to kind of anchor into their
Right.
physical body, and their physical
Right.
experience may be more than some a child who was delivered vaginally. That's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, if that is true, and then a lot of
Yeah.
people are like, well, then the soul doesn't come into the body until after birth. And then people get into like abortion conversation. It's like,
Mm,
you're missing the point here. You're getting caught in
yes.
the weeds of this polarized thing that we have to live with in North America. So when I tell that story about Evie, I'm like, okay, well, my intuition says, okay, a part of her was there, but
Mm,
perhaps all of those energetic bodies weren't fully embedded until she passed through the
yes.
birth canal. But the essence of Evie, Everly Rose, as our daughter, was there. And that was in
Yes.
that moment. And I had my hand on her belly. Or was she floating about, just hovering and looking over us? I mean, who knows? But I think about this almost every day, Emily.
Yeah.
Which is why it's fun.
Yeah.
It's like fun to talk to people like you, because you actually have direct experience with this on a regular basis. So it really helps to
Yes.
inform my care for other people.
What I will say, what I have experienced is I agree with you that there is often when a soul commits to an incarnation. So they're committing to a body. They're saying they're committed. Well, that happens before conception, but they're saying this is the family I'm preparing to come into. These are the circumstances, and you know, as it gets closer to conception, this is the body, and this is the time. That there is that soul fragment that is essentially attached to the body. That's
Right,
just small. It's
right,
tiny. It's a
right,
fragment.
right.
And the rest of the energy, the remainder of the energy stays in a different form, in a different state, in the spirit form or the spirit state or whatever you want to call it. And that they continue to kind of travel and learn and do all different kinds of things. And then it really differs when the energy, like sometimes, like as we've been talking about, the energy and all of the kind of the mechanics of the energetic bodies, you know, at birth, often that's happening, or in the
Yeah,
weeks following birth sometimes.
yeah.
Um, but the soul often really doesn't come fully into the body until much later in the pregnancy or during birth or after birth. So, but I think there is that fragment that stays with the body, just a small piece.
Yeah, right. Well, I definitely want to put the bulk of our attention on conception and calling, what I say is inviting the soul of this baby, the spirit of this baby, into the womb. But while we're on the topic, if a woman out there is pregnant, or maybe their partner is accompanying them, what guidance can you give as to how to focus your third eye, your soul, on communicating with the soul of this baby in utero? Can you maybe walk us through that? I mean, it's so abstract, I think, for so many people, but women I
Sure.
care for, especially those who value sovereignty and really want to be left alone, it's because they've been in commune with this baby this whole time,
Right.
and this is the final moment. Like, we're going to do this hard work together. So
Yes.
can you just, I don't know, that's a big question, but what do you think about that?
Yeah. I love it. And I really am a big advocate that I believe everyone, I don't want to say should, but I think it's really beautiful to get to have an experience of communication in utero with this beautiful child that you're carrying, because it's available. It's available for everyone. And like you said, I know for a lot of people that can seem really abstract. And I was even just laughing, like you said, about having like a text back and forth conversation with your daughter. Like, what? How does that work? But really, how that works is it's telepathic, right? That you have, just as you have this umbilical cord connecting you to this baby, you also have this kind of energetic telepathic cord
Yeah.
between you and your baby. And it's kind of like a telephone that a lot of people might not know that they can use, but is always available for them to use if they so choose. That's what I usually say, is that the telepathic communication between you and your baby is always available for you to be able to connect in with. And
Yeah.
that's likely for you why it felt like text messaging, because that is sometimes what telepathic communication can feels like. It's like ping, ping, back and forth,
It's
ping, 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 ping,
exactly,
ping.
you nailed it. That's exactly how it
Yeah.
felt. And that was also in ceremony, especially. Like, I went very deep one day. It was like a 20-hour harrowing, glued to the floor kind of experience, but I was comfortably just texting with the baby, the unborn baby inside my
Yes.
wife's belly, 1,500 miles away. It was
Yes.
insane. So
Yes. It's amazing. And that
yeah.
is true. Like, that's telepathic communication too, where it's like it transcends space and time. And so one of the things that I suggest to families who are looking to have in utero communication with their children, the children that they're carrying, is just to start practicing holding thoughts or messages and directing them kind of with your intention and your attention down towards where the baby is in your belly.
Yeah.
That's one way. And not even to expect anything to come back necessarily right away. It's kind of getting first into the practice of, how do I hold a thought, hold a message, hold something that I want to say, and then start to kind of, with my intention, start to direct that towards where I want it to go. And that's how telepathic communication works, really, with anyone or anything. You can do this with animals, you can do this with other people. It's getting kind of into this mind training and this mind control of, I can hold a thought, I can hold a frequency at my third eye or in my mind, and I can use my attention and my will to direct that where I want it to go. And that's really, like, that's what you're doing with the text message as well. You're picking who you want to send it to, you're typing out what you want to say, and you're sending the message off into the ether, really. And you're just trusting that, it's going to get delivered somehow using, cell phone signals or
Yeah.
whatever. And it's really the same thing with this telepathic communication. So that's one of the first things that I say, is just starting to get into the practice of this. And then you can also ask them questions and start to practice getting start to get into the practice of receiving a response of, what does that actually feel like. And everybody's different in terms of how they receive information and how they receive, um, whether that's telepathic information or psychic information of any kind, intuitive information of any kind. Some people are very body focused. Some people are very visual, like you and I, where we see imagery. Some people just kind of have information kind of just pop or ping into their mind some people may actually hear their children speaking to them. So it just really depends your particular way of receiving. And so that's kind of really a fun practice that people can get into, is just like holding the message, holding what you want to say. And this might take a bit of practice to, um, especially if this is kind of really different and off the wall for you, of sending and receiving and seeing what you can get back. But I've had really amazing feedback as I start to give this practice and this exercise to people. Is like, I asked the baby, I had this one client say, okay, I asked the baby, like, what would you like to eat today? And the baby came back with basically like this very specific kind of nutrient profile that they wanted the mother to eat kind of that night at dinner, that they were like looking to intake into their system as well, which I just thought was really interesting. And that's just like a small piece, but you can even use or ask bigger questions as well, like what's important for you during our birth experience together, and how do you want to come into this world, and what kind of energy are you looking to be in the room, and this kind of thing. So it's it will probably, if this is a newer concept for people, it will probably take a little bit of practice and back and forth, and also other partners, so the partner who is not carrying the baby, they can also do this exact same way. It is helpful to have maybe some sort of physical connection or contact, maybe hands on the belly or just sort of in close proximity. You don't necessarily have to be, because again, it transcends time and space, but that's also, you can do that. That person can do that the same way, where you're holding a thought and you're directing it in the direction of the place that you want it to go. And then also just leaving space for the receptivity part of it as well,
Yeah.
which can sometimes take some time to, like, some people kind of sometimes expect to get a response right away, which you might. And sometimes it can take them some time to kind of make sure that they have a clear pathway to get their response into your consciousness, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it really sounds like it's just a matter of paying attention.
Yeah.
And that sounds like I'm diminishing what you do, but you were gifted with, this, do you use clairvoyance, clairaudience? Do you use all of the clairs?
I use all of them. I use all of them, but I am very predominantly clairvoyant.
Clairvoyant.
It's,
So it comes to you as images. Is that what that means?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're gifted, I use the word gifted but I don't know why, because that means that somebody gave it to you, and maybe source, spirit, grandmother, whoever gave it to you.
Yeah.
But it was really something that, as a child, perhaps you just never stopped paying attention to that. I think that that's maybe more appropriate, because I think we all have this, quote, gift. Others just are way more in tune with it.
Yes.
And since I, described coming from this reductive medical education program, and then having to kind of, I don't know, come around to like understanding what my patients, my clients were telling me. And I hadn't ever paid attention to those things. I had to start kind of drifting into, well, how can I become better at that? And everybody thinks you meditate, you just pay attention to breathing. And yes, that is true. But even during meditation, many of us after 10 minutes are like, did I let the dog out? Or did I do this? And like you get so easily distracted. So it might take years of practicing, focusing your attention for 10 minutes at a time. And
Yes.
then doors start to open.
Yes.
But I don't know, are you familiar with Rudolf Steiner?
I am. Love him.
Yeah, so Steiner is one of the most, a little funny side note about that. If anybody's ever read anything written by Rudolf Steiner, or anything even transcribed from his lectures, it's almost impossible to understand what the guy's talking about. You have to reread it,
Totally.
reread it. So anybody who's like, I'm an expert in Steiner, you are BSing yourself and you're BSing me, because I have tried to read it, and you and I are not the dullest tools in the shed. And I can read like an entire book in a weekend if I need to. This is not a book for the weekend. And there was this guy on Instagram who was like, light reading, like some of my summer reading. And he was holding like Knowledge of Higher Worlds, which is one of Steiner's only truly fully written books. And it's only like 100 pages, but it is 100 pages of the most inconceivably challenging language. Because it's like, until you get to page 50, you're never going to understand what he said on page 2. I mean, it's this really challenging channeled text. So he's reading this on the
100%.
100%. Yeah, I'm glad we agree on that, because there's like, genius is a relative term. This guy was a genius, and I think part of his genius was because he was able to tap into, you can call it the Akashic records, you can call it source, whatever else. Informational fields is this new area in physics that's been neglected for years. If you can tap into that, you can ascertain anything about the universe you ever wanted to know. And he was able to do that and project it to an audience 5 times a day to a different group of people in a variety of different terms or disciplines. But so this guy's reading this book on Instagram, and he's like, "What are your favorite books for the summer?" And I'm like, "Bullshit, dude! You're not reading Knowledge of Higher Worlds at Venice Beach. Like, maybe you are, but that's not light reading. Like, that is, what did I just read? Let me go back and reread that entire chapter because I have no idea." And I'm studying anthroposophic medicine, and it is so tremendously difficult because it's using a totally different part of my intuition in order to be guided in my healing practice. But the reason I brought Steiner up was he has these 6 exercises. What does he call it? The 6 spiritual exercises, something like that. And they're meant to, one by one, you add one on top of the other. They're meant to help you hone this attention. And while I was studying biogeometry, which I'm still a student of, I realized that, I'm doing Steiner's exercises, and it's making me more perceptive of the subtle energetics in my garden, on my myself, on other people who are experimenting with this. And for anybody, if you just want to Google it, I'll link it in the show description. But the first 2 exercises are controlling the mind and controlling will. The first is controlling mind. For 2 to 5 minutes a day, you're going to focus on one item, a paperclip, a pencil in your mind, visualize it, and hold the vision for 5 minutes straight. I challenge everybody to pause this and try that. It is very, very hard to do that.
Yes.
And the next one is controlling your will. And that would be at the same time every day, you're going to do something completely arbitrary, like turn your wedding ring around on your finger. Doing those 2 alone is hard. And it gets deeper and deeper, but they're very simple exercises just to sort of demonstrate how simple this is, but also reflecting how it simultaneously is quite challenging to do even these simple things. But that's all that I guess there is in some ways, right?
Attention.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's it. And I love that. And I am also, I also just believe, like, just to touch on what you said, I think it's very much a channeled text, and it's one of those things that I think when I'm reading information like that, whether it's by Rudolf Steiner or anyone else, is I'm kind of just like, thank you just for helping me receive the energetic transmission from this, because my mind just has pretty much no idea what's happening here. So I'm just getting the energetic transmission from this book. Thank you for that. Just kind of skimming the words.
Yeah.
But I love what you're saying, and I think it encapsulates something that I teach in my work a lot, because as you mentioned before, I do a lot of kind of intuitive development and psychic development and mediumship development with people as well, which some of these people are people who are looking to use these abilities or use these gifts in their work. They want to help, they want to serve kind of very actively for people. And other people are just looking to understand, like you said, their subtle energetics, how they are receiving energy and information, and how they can telepathically communicate, or how they can communicate with their animals or their plants, or how they can communicate with their guides, ancestors, teachers, healers, and so on. And that attention and paying attention is such a huge part of it. And I have people who come to me and they say, "Well, Emily, I've never had a single intuitive or psychic experience in my life. Like, it's just, development isn't going to be possible for me. I don't know how you're going to teach me anything, because it's just never happened for me." And I take them through this process of really, essentially, like, as you said, is just the process of learning how to pay attention to this kind of underground current of energy and information that's always available for you to tap into. You just don't know necessarily how, or there's too much other distortion in the kind of the mental field, like just thought, or just the mind wheel kind of moving in a certain way that doesn't allow you to kind of feel like you can really access this underground current of information. And so I just teach people basically how to flip, so that underground current of energy and information that's incoming is what's taking up your attention first, rather than the mind, or oh, I'm looking at this with my eyes, or I'm hearing this with my physical ears. We have all these beautiful physical senses, but we have these kind of energetic senses as well, and these extra sensory senses, which actually I was reading this book by this woman, and she said that she wants to change the terminology from extrasensory to full sensory perception, which I really love that because she's basically saying like any kind of intuitive or psychic ability is not like an extra, it's not like a bonus. It's just when we get connected with, and that's we're connecting to our full sensory perception. We can see with our eyes, but
Right.
we can also see with our third eye. We can hear with our ears, but we can also hear what is not actually being said or what is not
Right.
actually being,
Right.
so
Right. Those
full
extra
sensory
sensory
perception.
perceptions. Like, yeah, I remember Gary Zhukov's works that I read a long time ago. He was like all into these sort of extra sensory perceptive
Yeah.
capacities that we all have. We just haven't been, again, paying attention.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So full sensory perception.
Hmm.
And then people have these amazing experiences where they're like, wow, I just did that or I just perceived that. Like that was amazing. And then when they get it once, it's easier to start to apply it and have different experiences with it in their everyday
Yeah.
life. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, Emily. I think that I'd love to spend the rest of our conversation on conscious conception. So, when you hear the term conscious conception, what comes to mind to you? And is there a different vernaculum that you've adopted as you've been working with spirit babies?
Yeah. I love this. And I do these, I got this terminology for this event that I do, these events that I do called super conscious conception. Um, And,
Hmm.
it's kind of a play on words of like the super conscious and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
conscious conception. Um, so it's conscious conception is a hugely important topic to me. It's maybe one of the most important things that I do and teach and believe in because I believe that conscious conception is really going to be kind of a foundational piece, or it is a foundational piece in the world that we're in now and the world that we're moving into. That
Totally.
parents and families all over the world are, it's really just natural for them to start to coordinate and to open communication with not only themselves and their bodies preconception. I think that's hugely, hugely important. That, I've heard so many things just about how we prepare so valiantly and with so much effort for so many other life transitions,
Sure.
and that perhaps conception is, I think it's changing. I think it's changing, but maybe it's not one of those ones that we feel like we have to put a ton of energy or attention towards beforehand. But again, like I said, and I'm sure as you know, this is changing now, but that goes on the from the perspective of starting to just be conscious around like just physically, what does my body need? What does my partner's body need? What do we need to look at before we're looking at bringing a child into this world? And then that also looks like opening up a connection and a communication with the soul of this energy, which I find in my work. These souls are like, they want it. They want it so
Mm-hmm.
bad. Like
Mm-hmm.
we've been talking
Mm-hmm.
about before, they're so alive. They're so animated. They're starting to take on these aspects of their life and personality in the family that they're coming into. And they're really, I don't want to say desperate, but they're really eager for this communication with their parents. And so I do my best to educate parents as well. Like, it is so important for you to feel connected to the soul of this child before they make their way here, and that is a huge element to conscious conception, and it can also help with, in my opinion, ease of conception as well.
Yeah.
That's what I've seen
Yeah.
time and time again.
Yeah.
And that also conscious conception looks like starting this process perhaps years in advance, 5, 10. I mean, depending on how long ahead we're looking here, 15 years, where people are thinking, I want to have a relationship with my children beforehand. Like for me, I already have a relationship with, because of what I know and what I teach, and I practice what I preach, and so I already have a relationship with this soul, the soul of my first child, and it's one of the my most cherished and most beautiful relationships, even though this soul is not physical yet and might not still be for another year or two. Um, but it's so intimate and it's so beautiful, and that I feel that I'm already getting information. And there's already information available for me, just in terms of, just so you know, before I come, these are certain things that
Yeah.
you have to do in your work,
Yeah.
and you have to get this book out. This book is a big piece of what I need to do before she makes her way here. She's made that very clear. So I'm, on the mission uh, for for this book, but also for her in a way. It's kind of dedicated to her, and being orchestrated and helped to be birthed by her in a certain
Yeah.
way. Um,
Oh,
and
wait,
conscious,
let's pause
yeah,
there, because
yeah,
to be birthed by her,
yeah.
um, even I know that that's terms we use all the time, but I never mind. I won't distract it from the conversation. Continue.
No, I know it. I
It's a
know what you're saying, and
lovely. Yeah,
I know why
go ahead.
it's important. I know it's important because, and I use that language very intentionally because she showed me that, and I really believe that creative projects are alive. They're living entities. They have their own energy field, and there's all different kinds of guides and teachers who want to help us kind of bring a creative project, or some sort of offering, or like an essay, like you said, like when you can just kind of like pop an
Yeah,
essay out in
yeah.
like 30 seconds or whatever, that
Oh,
there's
come on.
kind
It
of
was at
these
least
energy.
30 minutes, Emily. I'm not that good.
30
Jeez, these little
seconds, 30
fingers can only
minutes,
go so fast. I'm teasing.
that they can kind of help to bring something from ether into physical. They can help to birth that. I really believe that the creative process is very similar to the process of birth in some ways.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
and yeah, and so she said basically, I'm going to help you birth this book and bring this birth from ether into physical, so that I can then make my transition following this book from
mm,
ether into
mm.
physical. So it was very specific.
Yeah, so something else that that like you kind of sparked in me was the little the spirit of this baby is birthing you,
Yeah,
because you are stepping through this portal. I always say it's a spiritual transformation. And if
exactly.
you're going from maiden to motherhood, it doesn't matter how many babies you've had. You could have had 10 babies. You're still
Yeah.
transforming. You're dying and being reborn on the other side of
Yeah.
this. And that's why it is so scary and confronting for so many people. And
Yes.
so it kind of flips that on its head. Like, you're giving birth to the baby. Yes, the baby is also
Mm,
giving birth to you. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah. And I haven't had that experience yet. I don't have children yet, but that is what I have been told time and time again. It is this initiation. It's a true initiation. It's the baby is birthing you. Exactly
wow.
as you said. So, and then last thing I'll say on conscious conception, to me, it's also looking at some of the things that maybe sometimes this can be hard for people to accept, but some of the things that maybe need to change in our world,
Mm-hmm.
in our reality, and how we're operating, and different things that we're doing, in order to really create this kind of landing pad for these
Mm,
souls to come in,
mm.
this foundation for them to come in. So, for a lot of people, this is. I had actually this woman message me about this. I was talking about this on my social media platforms, and I was talking about how they will often kind of help us to initiate a change in our world and in our career and different things. And for this woman, she was a therapist, and was trying to conceive. Her and her partner were trying to conceive, and she had had two miscarriages as she was still working as a therapist in this specific practice. And she was what she was holding on to was, I want to stay as a therapist in this practice because I want to be able to have maternity leave and paid maternity leave and insurance and benefits and all of the perks that this job and this position offered her. And she said she got the message one day that the reason that this baby was still not here with her family is because she actually needed to depart the therapy position to begin her own practice that wouldn't include benefits, that wouldn't include a paid maternity leave by necessarily, that wouldn't include insurance. But that was part of the mission. That was part of what this soul was trying to help this mother do. And so she left the therapy position, and less than a month after she left, she conceived, and she's actually now 7 months ish pregnant and getting ready to. She started her own practice throughout this pregnancy, and
Wow.
getting ready to bring her child into this world. So you
Yeah.
see what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And when people start working with a doctor, a therapist, whatever else, we are all conditioned to see this as a physical process. Sperm, egg, meat, embryo implants, the uterus gets bigger, the baby gets bigger, a baby comes out 9, 10 months later.
Yeah.
But when a person's having issues with conception, one of the first things I ask people is, who are you and what is your purpose? And
Hmm.
I, ubiquitously, 100% of the time, people struggle with that question and the
Huge.
question of what archetype do you embody and which archetype do you wish to embody. They put a big
Yeah.
question mark on the worksheet. And,
Mhm.
you and I both are familiar with Paul Chek's work. You said your husband's a Chek practitioner. And
Yeah.
one of Paul's big teachings, like, say what you want about Paul Chek. He's the first person that really gave me the language to ask people
Mm.
about their one love. And if you're not on the path of doing the thing that your heart is calling you to do, that
Yeah.
absolutely will show up in the physical. It shows up in all of those energetic bodies we've talked about, but it does
Yes.
show up in the physical. So if you only want to look at this as physical, fine. But if you're doing something that
Yes.
is not your purpose, it is absolutely going to impact how your body performs, how the baby feels safe and seen and warm in
Yes.
your womb. Because, like, if mom's
Yes.
not doing the thing she wants to do, like, maybe it's not the right time for me to be there. Period.
Yeah.
Totally.
Precisely.
Totally.
Absolutely. And in this particular woman's experience, like we're talking about subtle energetics here, like technically she was a therapist practicing therapy. She's still technically a therapist practicing therapy right now in her own practice. However, she's also incorporated energy healing,
There
which
you
is
go.
just like so exciting for her.
Yeah.
And she's always wanted to do it, but she couldn't before within the confines of the organization that she was working within. So now she has her own practice and she's so in her purpose. She's so
Hmm.
in her alignment, and she's not feeling any fear around um not making enough, money and maternity leave and how that's all going to work out. She's just this her and this soul have this beautiful back and forth communication of just like, I've got you, and
Yeah.
I got you
Yeah.
to this place for a reason. And
Wow.
the truly, Nathan, like I love that you bring it up because the purpose and the why is so crucial. It's so crucial, and I see it as for both either partner again and again and again as a huge um, importance of conception and really assisting conception. So
Mm. Yeah. So, for a couple, I'm working with a couple right now, so maybe we can just use them as an example. They've gone through all
mhm,
the intrauterine insemination. They've gone through that a couple times, which requires you to be jacked up with all these hormones.
yeah,
They are both very financially secure. They're both work, but they've got plenty of money. I don't think that they would have to work as much as they are, but it gives them something to do. And they have both expressed to me, like, I'm not really happy with my job, but like the getting's good.
mm,
Let's just make money. We get our bank account padded because everybody thinks babies are super expensive, and yeah, they are. But you're not spending money on a lot of other things that you were before. It's not
yeah,
that expensive. There are people around the world that raise perfectly healthy, very intelligent, high achieving kiddos who
yeah,
have very, 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 very little money. So we have this illusion of scarcity, which, through the lens of Ayurveda would be like a first and second chakra issue.
mhm,
But even in Maslow's hierarchy in the world of psychology, like, we have this idea that our bare minimum isn't even met. But how many of us are
yeah,
living in in what's the word? Not exuberance, but we're living in a state of excess, right? We have all of our stuff
mhm,
in four walls and siloed off in our house. And so as I'm
yeah,
talking to them, it's like, are you guys calling in the spirit of this baby? I'm not so sure that they know really what that means. And I'm still working on them through this. What does it
mhm,
mean to call in the spirit of a baby? They're
mm,
not clairvoyant, perhaps, like you, but what can a couple do in order to start this communication? I know we talked about this a little bit, which was in the honing of the paying attention, but what
yes.
exercises can a couple do in order to really connect with one another and to really start their family before the baby's even in the womb?
Yeah, such a good question. And I will say, I'll share this with you because I think this actually would be really great to share with your audience and with your community. I have a spirit baby connection guided meditation that's about 20 minutes long. And I find, just as a starting point, I'm going to get into some other things, but I find that for people who are like, what is this? How do I call in the spirit of this baby? A guided meditation is just a really nice place to start. It gives some context, it gives a container to explore a relationship. So I'm going to share that with you
Yeah.
and your community. And then beyond that, I know what you mean, where it's kind of like for people who are not familiar with that kind of terminology, like what does that mean?
Yeah.
How do we do that?
Yeah.
How do we do
So
that as
abstract.
individuals? How do we do that together? It really is. And so something that I have seen a lot of success with, and I offer this to my clients, is one of the ways that We are constantly kind of communicating with the universe, and the universe is communicating with us is through signs and symbols. There's
Mm.
signs and symbols in everything and
Oh
everything that
yeah.
we do. And so, what I'll have them do is I'll have them kind of, it doesn't have to be like a whole song and dance necessarily. It's beautiful if they feel like going into a ceremony and sitting down together and sitting across from each other and maybe having some soft music playing. If that's all sounding a little, you know, for some people, they're like, yeah, let's do it. And other people are like, we don't have time for that. And that's fine. If you have time for that, beautiful. That's a beautiful way to do it. And it can look like just some sort of simple intuitive invocation. So this can sound like thank you to the soul of our first child for coming to be
Mm.
in communication with us today. We love you so much. We cannot wait to meet you. We cannot wait to see who you get to be in this world. We cannot wait to help support you in your mission. We cannot wait to nurture the unique and individual being that you are. We're so happy to welcome you. Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
making your way onto planet Earth very soon. That's like just a beautiful invocation that opens the space. Obviously, the person and the family can make that their own. And from there, that can look like we would, and then you could kind of go and flow into, we would love to open up this communication with you further. Can you communicate with myself or my partner in XYZ way? Um, a way that souls love to communicate is through dreams. So for a lot of people, that's very accessible for them just to say, tonight in my dreams or this week in my dreams, can you come and give me an experience of your energy? And again, sometimes it can take some time for that soul to kind of um, hear and receive and respond to that request. But 99% of the time, when I give that exercise to people, the soul makes it happen and they come into the dream in some way. So that's one way that's kind of simple and accessible, and you can have some fun with it. Another way is to
I
set a
love
sign
that
or symbol,
already.
as I mentioned.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's easy, and it allows us, like, there is something about the dream world, right, where people can kind of accept different experiences that maybe they wouldn't be able to accept or understand with their conscious or their waking mind. It's almost easier to let that integrate.
Hmm.
So that's one way. And then another way that I recommend or that I have my clients do is ask for a sign or symbol. So actually this story is my brother and sister-in-law. I was helping them in their conception journey. And so we kind of did this together. They mostly did it on their own, but I was sort of just there to assist. And they opened up this communication with the soul of their first child, who my sister-in-law is currently carrying, which is beautiful. We're all very excited. Um, and so they decided with this soul that his communication, his sign or symbol that he was going to send to them to let them know that he was around, was a blue butterfly. And so
Wow.
there was so many different amazing experiences that they had with the sign. So one time they were driving in the car together, and this song came on the radio where this artist was like, it was like such a weird occurrence because it was this artist who was strictly singing about blue butterflies. And it was like so
Amazing.
strange, but this
Wow.
happens shortly after they said that, right? And then they were looking to buy. They were selling their house and looking to buy a new one. And they walked into their house, their current house, and in the kitchen, the wallpaper was actually, it's still there. It's it's not the prettiest wallpaper I've ever seen, but it's okay. They made it. The soul made it happen, and the sign that he gave was these big, kind of gaudy blue butterflies all over the wallpaper in their future kitchen. And so he really found all of these amazing ways to communicate his signs and symbols to this couple, and they got to have it as an experience together. So when they walked into the house, they looked at each other like, oh my God, there's these blue butterflies on this wallpaper right now. We asked for that. This is happening. It was so amazing for them to have
Wow.
that experience together,
Yeah.
so unifying, and it allowed them to feel so both connected, closely connected to the energy of their son, who is on his way here and will be here sometime in November. So those are just some ways that a family, an individual, a couple can start to facilitate that communication that hopefully is simple and brings it down from the
Yeah.
abstract a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Can
Hmm.
you maybe tell, that was a beautiful story. Are there any other clients that come to mind that have maybe used a slightly, maybe it was less of
Different.
less symbology, but maybe it was more of a I don't know. I don't know.
Yep.
Maybe just a different client that had a slightly different story, just so people can
Yeah.
sort of contrast how
More
there's not a right answer here
context.
to this. Yeah.
Yes. And that's so important because that's a huge part of what I like to teach is that every communication is different and every soul is communicating differently. So I do have another one. This was with a woman who her and her husband have a child already. He is, I believe, he's 5 or 6. And when she had her pregnancy with her first son, um, she didn't have the, I guess, the easiest experience. She had preeclampsia and different things, and her OBGYN, which I'm sure you'll love this. Her OBGYN said, "You will never carry another child. Your body is not meant to have pregnancy, and you can't do it, and this is too dangerous for you," and so on and so on and so on. And so she had her first son and was like, "This is my only child. I'm not going to be able to have a future pregnancy." And so I met her, and I didn't know any of this until after the fact. And when I was doing a reading for her, there was this little girl energy who showed up and was like, "Hey, I'm your, future daughter," and went into some different details. And then this woman told me, "Well, Emily, I can't have children anymore. That's not possible for me. I was told it's not possible. It's too dangerous, and X, Y, Z." And so then this soul went into this whole transmission about how that was not true, and
You're whipping out
this that
data
this
like you got to see this.
yeah, no, no, shake that off. That wasn't
Oh
right,
my
all this
gosh.
kind of stuff. But basically, just said that was the projection of that professional, and the soul was here and was going to work with her to help her see that this could be a possibility and a reality with her for her. And so basically she left it as like she'll come and she'll work with you. I'm going to kind of step back now. I'll leave it to you two. You can kind of take it away.
Mm.
And so this was about in 2020, beginning of 2020. And so from that point on, this woman basically went on this kind of health and wellness journey. She kind of overhauled her health and how she was caring for herself and different things. And she also started getting into meditation, which she hadn't necessarily been practicing before. And she started having these experiences in this meditation where the soul would come into her meditation. She would kind of see the soul visually, like this, the same little girl that I was talking to, and kind of getting the same encouragement and just basically fear busting from some of the energy that she had taken on from that experience. And um, so then basically she got the instructive from the soul, like, you are going to try to conceive, and it ended up being April 2022, so just this year.
And she was in
And
her own meditative practice, like whatever that
yes, getting
was.
this.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which this is cool because she was like, "I'm not someone who can meditate. I can't really get this information." But as she started just sort of slowly practicing, every day she would get a little bit more communication, a little bit more visual, and this kind of thing. So she got this kind of instructive on the timeline and was able to conceive, and is now having a very beautiful, beautiful pregnancy experience with everything looks great. And she's about sort of halfway there. So that's another example of just basically someone who, through their connection and communication with the soul, was able to actually kind of um, choose a different experience and choose a different reality than one that she had been given.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, I
yeah.
mean, there you have it. If there's also a thread of which we don't have to get into today, but there's also a thread of that sort of whether you think you're right or whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And
Mhm.
so when the doctors flippantly say things like, "Oh, you probably can't have babies. Sorry, I think your ovaries are too old, or eggs are wasting away." It's that question from your Aunt Polly that's like, "When are you going to have babies? When are you going to have babies? When are you going to have babies?" You actually start to believe like, "Oh my gosh, there's actually a clock somewhere that's ticking and everybody can hear it but me." Again, it's
Yeah.
distracting us
Yeah.
from looking inward and to
Absolutely.
really tapping into that. So,
Mhm.
for that particular woman you're talking about, she was taught, she was conditioned to believe that she couldn't have babies, and that's
Yeah.
that's also true if you
Yeah.
believe that. Now, that's not to
And
say that, hey, you're not trying
yeah.
hard enough, you're not tapping in hard enough, that's why you're not getting pregnant. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is
Mhm.
that we need to be a little bit more respectful and perhaps gentle with how we approach these things, because what you say as a healthcare professional, especially like somebody like me,
Mhm.
really matters. It really matters to people what
Yeah.
you say and how you make a
Yeah.
person feel,
Mhm.
because that's not
Yeah.
necessarily the case. Even if statistically it's low, that does not mean you can't have babies. It just means, hey, we might need to do a little digger deeping or deeper digging.
Yeah.
And that's why
Yeah.
people find
Yeah.
me, and we do quite an array of different things that your OBGYN will never do. That's not me
Yeah.
shamelessly plugging myself. I think people know what my practice is, but I was finding that too many of my colleagues were saying things like that. And then,
Right.
this particular couple would be like, well, to hell with you. And they go off and like
Mhm.
maybe have like an ayahuasca experience. And like, we met a soul that is
Right.
coming through. So take your white
Yes.
coat and beat it, buddy.
F you.
Yeah, F
Yeah.
you. I'm having a baby. And
Yeah.
sure enough, they almost always
Yes.
do. It's just a matter of helping them rewire them in a way that they do believe that they can do it. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And I think that that's, yeah, just like you said, that kind of belief really goes, like, I've one of the things that I've kind of handled in a lot of these events is even just like, the concept of advanced maternal age and conception and things like this, and eggs and all these kind of things. And of course there are these actual, reality and different factors that we're working with, but also just kind of giving this new model of empowerment to these women who, I just had a one of my clients who's just had her first child at 42. Amazing.
Yeah.
And she just always held a vision. She was like, yeah, I'll be able to have a baby whenever the soul is ready and whenever my partner and I are ready. And she did. And it
Yeah.
was really
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
So, like you said, that woman that I previously referenced, she said this, these are her own words. She said, I let that belief and I let that story that was projected onto me spread like wildfire, and I took it on as a piece of my identity. And basically through the communication with the soul, she was able to kind of shed that projection and come back to her truth. And she's so happy now. So
Yeah.
beautiful.
Wow, Emily, you're so special. I'm really, really glad that I've gotten to know you. And you and I are going to be, well, we'll chat about your roundtable
Yeah.
here in a minute. I wanted to ask one
Hmm.
final question. What are some other,
Sure.
we've already really kind of gone into this, but I did want to make sure we checked everything off the list of the things that you and I
Hmm.
had discussed pre-recording. Apart from what we've already said, are there any other considerations or spiritual blocks that might be an impediment to conception?
This is interesting. So I feel, and I think in my opinion and in my experience, that there is a different kind of, um, this term infertility is quite becoming, there's, some energy behind it. And
Hmm.
it's kind of maybe I don't know, a buzzword right now. And that there's maybe a different, in just what I have gotten is that there's perhaps a couple of different types of this. So, but there's like the physical kind of infertility experience, which is maybe there's something biologically happening there. But then there's also this kind of energetic experience, or these energetic blocks to conception in my experience. And like you said, we have touched on quite a few of them: purpose and work and life's work and the
Hmm.
alignment of that. And timing is a big one. It's bigger than we can even understand. I know it sounds like such a cliche. It's like, just wait for the right time. And I know that's like so frustrating for some families to hear, of just like, it's just not the right time, or just keep, there's all these kind of platitudes that can be thrown around. But I also think the power of the timing and trusting in the power of the timing of this child's soul, and that they really have this kind of super perspective on what's happening, which again you can tap into for comfort and context as well. It's sort of like, what's happening there with you, what's going on, what is your timeline, is there anything I need to know about your timeline, is there a reason you haven't come yet, do I need to do anything different? Again, it's just like coming into this dialogue, and also being willing to make adjustments in your life for surrounding what the soul is kind of giving to you as well. Timing is a big one. Um, Harmony between partners can sometimes
Yeah.
be one, where if there's something that the partners need to kind of merge more deeply into before conception, or kind of air
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
even, or have some honesty around. This is huge. And I know it can be sometimes hard for people to hear because they're like, we're good, everything's fine, nothing's wrong. And I had this one a couple that I was working with, who the male counterpart in the relationship, he really had to, like, he wasn't even really subconsciously sure if he wanted children, and they were trying to conceive, and he was kind of carrying around this, like, I don't even know if I want to do this, and I'm kind of freaked out, and am I even going to be able to be a father, and all these kinds of things. And the um his partner was not aware of these fears and was not aware of these concerns. And as soon as he spoke those fears and concerns to her and was like, I'm a little freaked out.
Bingo.
I don't know if I can do this. I'm feeling really nervous about XYZ. They were able to come deeper into honesty in their partnership, and she was able to just be like, yeah, I'm scared too.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
let's get together on that fear. And shortly after, they were able to conceive, once they got kind of on that same energetic page. So
Yeah.
I see harmony between partners as being a big piece in terms of energetic blocks to conception. Ironically, another big one is environment and location. I've seen parents who are trying to conceive in really busy city centers with lots of, you know, distortion and density and different kind of frequencies being thrown around, and then they move into maybe a more rural environment, and they're able to conceive shortly after that. So sometimes environment and location is one. um Trying to think what else. Growth for either party, career,
Yeah.
lessons, relationship part. I think
Yeah.
I've hit a lot of
I think
them.
you have. Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that deeply. I mean, one thing I can share from our personal story was, of course, when we're taught, when we start getting interest, and wanting to explore sexuality, we're 14, 15, probably even earlier than that, but we don't really know what that means. But then when you start for me, looking at women, and I was like, oh, wow, I wonder what having sex is like. You start thinking about
Yeah.
that, and then you show up in your health class, and you're told, hey, if you get close to a woman with an erect penis, you're going to get them pregnant. So we sort of
Yes.
avoid this altogether, and then suddenly, bam, now we're going to get together and we're going to have a baby. Like, that's a pretty confronting thing. And
Mhm.
so when we started, quote, trying, I don't even really like that term, because if you're having sex,
Yeah.
you're not trying. You just don't know what the spirit of this baby's going to say. Yep, now's the time. Like, condom breaks,
Yeah.
whatever. I mean, like, there's a lot out of your control here. People are like, oh, we need to get better condoms. Like, is it possible that something else was at play here? That this baby just needed a way to come through?
Totally.
But
Yes.
we didn't get pregnant right away. And when I mean right away, like
Mhm.
3 or 4 months, and I was like, what on earth? And I was like an
Mm.
OBGYN at the time. Like, I was super early on. Like, I had all of this other conceptions, but I was still like, sperm meets an egg and a baby grows.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it. So my wife eventually was like, she could tell I was getting frustrated, and we had just come back from Burning Man. And she was
Mhm.
like, I get the sense that, like, you think that life is just going to be the same way it's always been. Where I was like really into rock climbing. I was an Ironman distance triathlete before med school. So, like, I've always had this sort of extreme approach to anything. Like, I want to go head first in and spend 2 hours a day doing this thing after work. And, like, I had infinite amounts of energy. And we just come back from Burning Man. It was like, if we have kids, they're going to be in our orbit. Like we're in charge. They're just going to be, buddying along.
Mm.
And she, I think, was really confronted by that. And she was like, Nathan, I need you to say out loud, things are going to change when we have kids. And I had a hard time doing it.
Mm.
I was like, no, I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, they'll change. She's like, say it out loud, because I don't
Mm.
feel good about the fact that you don't realize, like, you're the
Yeah.
smartest person I know, and you don't realize that our life is going to change. Our marriage is going to change. Our romance is going to
Mm.
change. Everything is going to change. And so I said it
Yeah.
out loud, somewhat not begrudgingly, but it was like, ugh, I didn't realize that I'm having a hard time saying this. And
Mhm.
once I did, of course, 2 months after that, my wife was also like, why don't you stop worrying about this? And I'll just tell you when it's time. And then, bam, we got pregnant. So whether or not it was
Yes.
using some adequate, cervical mucus tracking, or if it was a combination of that with
Yeah.
me
Both.
aligning myself energetically, yeah. When you were saying all this, I think back to all these worksheets I have my fertility clients do, and the big three
Mhm.
questions are: what do you need for the baby to be ready to come in? What does your partner need? and what does the baby need to
Yeah.
feel ready? And when
Yeah.
you compare their
It's
answers, you
huge.
oftentimes see that big contrast that I just described between me and my wife, where the man's always like financial
Absolutely.
stability, and I want to, I want to, uh, my wife to feel like we have enough resources, or it's always the same kind
Mhm.
of thing from like our conditioned sort of wounded masculine, and the woman is like,
Yeah.
I need to feel like I can be open-hearted and have time to
Mhm.
love this baby, and I want to spend every moment in this and that, and it's like, whoa, you guys are in two different places. But once you get them talking about
Yeah.
that, we resolve some of those spiritual blockades. It sounds so
Absolutely.
simple, but it's actually
Oh,
very hard. It's very hard work.
so hard, but very powerful.
Yeah.
And it really, I love that you brought that up because it is like, I do see that. I use that one example of kind of the masculine like outing his fear, and then the feminine was able to come in and they were able to like get together. But even just like the simplicity of us kind of outing or saying or embracing or accepting different things, like in your experience, maybe this is going to change. I mean, it can be so powerful in the energetic of just
Yeah.
supporting that soul. Sometimes that's all they need to hear. And that's really how they're kind of already helping to help us facilitate a change, right? Where it's kind of like, okay, good. He just got that lesson around
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
change,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and like how my reality is going to
Yeah.
shift. And or this other partner got the lesson around like it's cool, it's okay to be scared, like that's fine. And then that creates just a really clean kind of energetic to support
Yeah.
conception.
Amazing. Well,
So
Emily, we
cool.
have gone for well over an hour here. I appreciate you so much because you and I are also going to see each other a little bit later today. By the time this
Yes, we
episode
are.
airs, I think it's going to be November. But do you want to talk about some
Yeah,
things that you're promoting? Maybe we can push it up and publish a little earlier
sure.
in case there's something you want to promote, or maybe your book's coming out soon. Where can people find you, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah. So I hang out on Instagram. I'm at Emily the Medium. I do these events every couple months, usually every 3 months. So I have one coming up in August. I'll have probably another one in October, maybe another one in December. Every 3 months, usually I do it. Called Super Conscious Conception, which I said, which are just these really beautiful group kind of healing events where women and men, I've had a couple men come too, which is always super fun. I had this one man come to my event and I did a little guided meditation, and he messaged me after like, "Oh my god, I've never had such a powerful meditation experience. Like that was crazy." He had a really beautiful experience with his soul, with the soul of his child. So that was really
Oh, I
cool.
love that.
And it's just really a chance to get a room filled with these people on the planet who are either trying to conceive, are currently pregnant, um, or want to conceive in the future, maybe in the far future, and just get this kind of group energy field of different things that these spirit babies want to say, different little piece of information that I picked up. I do some energy healing, we do some Q&A, so it's a really fun, beautiful time. So those are called super conscious conception. That's one of the things that I'm doing. And then as we know, I'm writing this book, which is a labor of love, and it's taking me much longer than I thought it was going to take, as but there's just so many facets and so many areas that I want to cover. So that should be out, I'm hoping, early 2023.
Can you
So
send me a
stay tuned
copy?
for that. Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely. You bet.
I'd love to be
Yes.
able to promote it and
Um,
support you in any way that I can. Yeah, I have a feeling it's going
yes,
to be one of
thank
those
you.
like top 5 books that I need people to read if they're starting to
Oh,
talk about building
amazing.
their family, because I know I love you already. So we're going to
Oh,
get your
that
work
means
out
so
there.
much. Yay, thank you.
Yeah.
So that should be out early 2023. And then other than that, I usually kind of update on social media platforms if I have other things going on. We've got this cool little roundtable discussion we're doing tonight, which I'm super excited for. And this is sort of half a research project for my book and half just a cool chance to get a bunch of amazing people in a little discussion together and jam on all different kinds of topics that we're talking about
Yeah.
here, like birth and conception and pregnancy
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
postpartum and all these kinds of beautiful things. So maybe we'll do another one in the future. We'll
Yeah.
see.
Totally.
But
Yeah.
yeah, that's where I'm at.
Amazing, Emily. Well, thank you so much. I'll see you a
Mm,
little bit later for your
thank you.
roundtable. And
Yeah,
stay in
thank you.
touch. I've already got a couple clients I'm
Thank
going to
you.
be sending your way. So, in fact, as soon as we finish
Thank you.
recording, I'm going to send them your way.
You're amazing.
Yeah.
I just want to say, Nathan, thank you so much for having me on this beautiful podcast. It's such a gorgeous offering to the world at this time. I really think all of the content and everything you curate on this platform is so incredible in all of the different areas that you cover. It's really beautiful, and I'm honored to have a spot here. So thank you.
Coveted spot. I
Yeah,
rolled out the
a
red
spot.
carpet for you. Just can't see it. It's down here and my dog's
Thank
laying
you.
on it. But thank you so much, Emily. We'll send everybody your
And
way.
thank
And
you.
I'm sure I'll be
Yeah,
talking to you very soon.
sounds good. Take care.